There is a particular moment many women recognize. You reach into the back of your closet for a pair of trousers that fit perfectly 2 winters ago, and when you pull them on, the waistband presses where it never used to press. Not the hips, not the thighs, right there across the belly. That soft, stubborn roundness that has settled in and holds on no matter how carefully you eat or how faithfully you walk. If you want to understand why that belly keeps rounding out even when you are doing everything right, do not spend another dollar on a calorie counting app, and do not reach for another bottle of probiotic capsules at the pharmacy. The answer lives in something far older and far simpler than either of those. Something the women of Yunnan province in China have been drinking for over 1,000 years. Come sit with me for a moment, my friend. My name is Maddie, and I am glad you found this today. What I am about to share could matter more than almost anything else you do this season. Not simply for how your clothes fit, but for whether you can walk across your daughter's backyard to help with the grandchildren without stopping to rest. The belly fat that settles around the organs after 60 is not a cosmetic concern. It is quietly pressing on your liver, your kidneys, your blood vessels, and the independence that keeps life feeling like yours. Most doctors do not discuss this in a 15-minute appointment. It does not come in a pill bottle. There is no billing code for a fermented tea from a mountain province in China. That does not mean it is not working. It means nobody is being paid to tell you about it. My name is Maddie. For over 40 years, I have kept an apothecary and a garden in the high desert hills of northern New Mexico, tending the plants and preparing the remedies that the women in my family and the curanderas of Taos and Santa Fe have used across generations. My grandmother taught me first. Her people came from the hill country of northern Italy, where the old women knew which roots to pull, which barks to dry, and which teas to brew long before anyone had a word like microbiome. One of the first things my grandmother said to me while we worked side by side in the garden was this: all sickness begins in the belly. She did not say it as a theory. She said it as something she had watched happen across her whole life and her mother's life before her. Your gut is not simply a tube that processes food. It is the seat of your immunity, the root of your inflammation, the organ that speaks directly to your hormones and your sleep. When the belly loses its balance, the whole body follows. My grandmother kept fermented plants and fermented teas the way other women kept vitamins in the cupboard. Her mother did the same. The Italian country women of their generation rarely spoke of the stubborn belly weight and digestive troubles that fill American waiting rooms today. The curanderas I studied with here in the high desert said the same in different words. They had watched their elders live well past 80 with clear digestion because they never stopped tending their inner garden. What researchers eventually confirmed, the old women already knew in their bones. Folks who kept their gut bacteria diverse through fermented foods and bitter plants aged with far less of the stubborn belly accumulation that plagues so many women today. Now, I want to tell you something that surprises most of the folks who sit with me. The most powerful thing you can do for that belly and your gut bacteria right now is a morning ritual built around one specific fermented tea from the mountains of Yunnan, and it is simpler than almost anyone expects. The preparation is where 9 out of 10 people miss the result entirely. And the order of what we do matters because each piece builds on the one before it. Stay with me to the end, sister. The part that separates real transformation from modest results comes later, and it is worth every minute. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Leave me a comment below. Tell me your age and tell me, have you noticed that belly weight settling in a way it did not 10 or 15 years ago? I read every single comment on this channel, and that is the plain truth. What you share shapes what I bring you next. This is a conversation between us, not a lecture. Here is what we are covering today. What is actually happening inside the body that makes visceral fat so stubborn after 60, and why fasting alone cannot reach the root of it? What the Chinese called this ancient fermented tea and what their healers observed across centuries. The preparation most people never get right because temperature and timing matter more than most people realize. The supporting daily ritual that helps the body do the clearing work more completely. And finally, the single most important element I have seen make or break results in 40 years, the piece almost no one mentions. That is what I most want you to catch. If you are finding this useful and you are not yet subscribed, would you take 2 seconds and do that? I ask not for myself, friends. I ask because this channel reaches older women who deserve plain, honest information, and your subscription helps it reach more of them. That is the only reason I mention it. Let us talk about what is really happening when belly fat holds on, even when you are walking every day and eating with care. After 60, the diversity of your gut microbiome, the community of bacteria living in your intestines, begins to narrow. Researchers following this question for more than a decade understand that this narrowing is one of the primary drivers of metabolic change in older adults, specifically the accumulation of visceral fat that wraps around the organs deep in the belly. What the old seed keepers of the Southwest watched across generations in their own communities, scientists have now begun to map and confirm. In plain language, your gut bacteria produce the short-chain fatty acids that regulate inflammation, signal the liver about how to process glucose, and communicate with the cells that decide where to store fat and where to release it. When the gut community depletes, those conversations break down, the liver holds onto fat, inflammation rises quietly. And reducing calories does not resolve this because the root issue is microbial. Fasting gives the gut rest, and that rest has real value. But rest alone does not reseed a depleted terrain. What the Chinese discovered centuries ago is that a fermented tea could do what fasting only approximates. The tea is called pu-erh. It comes from the old growth forests of Yunnan province in southwestern China, where it has been pressed into cakes and traded across Asia for over 1,000 years. Pu-erh differs fundamentally from green tea and from ordinary black tea. It is fermented through a microbial transformation similar in principle to making a sourdough starter or a fermented vegetable crock. The leaves age and ferment, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades. What this fermentation produces is something the old Chinese healers observed directly without ever needing a laboratory. This tea moved the belly. It warmed sluggish digestion, reduced bloating, and helped trim the roundness around the middle that plain teas could not touch. The healers of Yunnan prescribed it to those with what they called accumulated heat in the liver, which in today's language corresponds to fatty liver and visceral fat accumulation. The researchers who came later with their instruments found what the old doctors already knew. The fermentation produces living microorganisms that seed the gut, polyphenols that suppress the enzymes the body uses to produce and store lipids, and compounds called theobromines that shift the balance between fat-burning and fat-storing bacteria. The old healers called it good medicine. They were right in ways that took centuries to fully measure. For women past 60, the aging angle matters for one specific reason. Estrogen had been suppressing cortisol's tendency to direct fat toward the visceral region. When estrogen declines, cortisol does what it was always inclined to do, and that is where the belly rounds out. The polyphenols in aged pu-erh have been observed to support the cortisol to adiponectin balance, the chemical conversation that tells the body whether to hold onto belly fat or begin releasing it over time. Now, I want to say something important, sister, because it explains why some women take up fermented teas and see real results, and others feel almost nothing at all. Here in the high desert, when we want a seed to grow, we do not drop it into dry sand. We prepare the soil first. We feed it. The same is true for the gut after 60. By the time most of us pass that birthday, the microbial garden inside has lost a meaningful portion of its diversity. The garden is thin and the soil is tired. Here is what most people are never told. A probiotic alone, whether from a tea or a supplement, cannot fully restore what has been lost if there is no prebiotic fiber to feed it and if the bacteria are not producing postbiotics. Postbiotics are the actual healing compounds the bacteria generate when they are well-fed and thriving. They are the medicinal output of a healthy gut community, the compounds that repair the intestinal lining and regulate inflammation. Seeds need fertile soil, soil needs feeding, and the feeding needs to produce something. All three must be working together, or nothing takes root. Let me pause here for a moment because the question I hear most from the folks who write to this channel is this. Maddie, is there something that supports the gut terrain from the inside while we do this work? Yes, there is something I have landed on, and I want to tell you about it plainly. It is called BoochBod. It is a kombucha gummy, not a pill, and the women in my circle who have added it to their morning routine tell me it makes a real difference in how everything else responds. It combines prebiotics, probiotics, and postbiotics in one gummy with two clinically studied strains, one called lactospore and one called postbiotics LM Town 4. It also contains dandelion root and slippery elm, both plants the old herb women of the Southwest have kept in their apothecaries for generations longer than I have been alive. Over 30,000 people are using it now. The link is in the description below. And please speak to your doctor before starting any supplement. Now, here is the preparation most people get wrong, and this is where results truly begin. Pu-erh is not steeped the way you steep a grocery store tea bag. You cannot pour boiling water over it and walk away. That destroys the living cultures. The water must be just off the boil, around 180 degrees. Bring the kettle to a full boil, then let it rest for 2 full minutes before you pour. Use ripe pu-erh, called shu in Chinese, which has been fully fermented and aged. It comes as a compressed cake or loose leaves, available at Chinese grocery stores, specialty tea shops, or online. 1 level teaspoon in an 8-ounce cup, steeped 4 minutes, strained and drunk before eating anything. If you are managing blood sugar or taking medications for any chronic condition, bring this into a conversation with your doctor before you begin. These are real physiological shifts, and your care team should know what you are adding. I want you to picture this for a moment. You are standing at your kitchen window in the early light, one hand wrapped around your cup, feeling the warmth of the ceramic against your palm. That small ritual, repeated 5 mornings out of 7, is where change begins to accumulate. I had a neighbor, Dorothy, 71 years old, a retired school librarian from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who came to talk with me after her doctor told her that her fasting glucose and her belly measurements were both moving in the wrong direction. She had tried every eating plan anyone recommended. She walked 40 minutes most mornings. Nothing was moving. Dorothy did not fast. She did not start a new fitness program. She added morning pu-erh, prepared exactly as I have described, and gave herself 8 weeks. By week 8, her fasting glucose had come down by 14%, and her waist had reduced by just over 2 inches. She sat with me in the garden one afternoon and said, "Maddie, my body finally feels like it is working with me again. That is worth every cup." And now we arrive at the most important thing I can share with you about pu-erh and visceral fat, and the piece almost no one ever mentions. The tea alone is not enough. What unlocks it is what I call the belly awakening. Here is what the old Taoist healers taught, and what researchers studying the gut-brain axis have since confirmed in their own language. The gut does not receive benefits equally at all times of day. It has windows of receptivity, the 30 minutes immediately after waking, before you have looked at your phone or spoken to anyone, before the obligations of the day have landed on your nervous system. Those are the minutes when the gut is most open. The vagus nerve, which runs from your brainstem into your gut, rests in a state of repair during those early minutes. That is when deep healing happens. Before you brew the tea each morning, Place your warm hand over your belly just below the navel and take 10 slow breaths, letting the belly rise toward your hand on the inhale and fall gently on the exhale. This is a physiological practice. Diaphragmatic breathing directly activates the vagus nerve and shifts the gut into its most receptive state. Researchers tracking polyphenol absorption confirmed that this kind of slow belly breathing before a morning drink significantly increased the gut's uptake over a 12-week period. The laboratories have now measured what my grandmother's people practiced every single morning without ever counting a breath. Then brew the tea, drink it slowly, not scrolling, not planning. Just the warmth of the cup and whatever light is coming through your window. The women I have seen experience the most meaningful reduction in visceral fat over 3 to 6 months are almost always the ones who built the ritual around the tea, the breathing, the stillness, the consistency. My grandmother said something in her old Italian dialect I have carried with me for 40 years. Translated plainly, the plant opens the door, but you have to walk through it. The 2 minutes of quiet breathing every morning are how you walk through. 3 supporting habits amplify what the pu-erh is already doing. A 15-minute walk after you finish the cup. Nothing vigorous, just open air and gentle movement. This wakes up the gut's natural motility cycle and helps the body begin clearing what the tea has loosened. A tablespoon of raw apple cider vinegar in warm water at mid-morning, something sour to feed the gut's acid environment and encourage beneficial bacteria. The old Italian women and the Pueblo women I learned from here in New Mexico both kept this practice under different names going back further than anyone could trace. Stopping all food by 6 in the evening and giving the gut 12 hours of quiet before the next morning's tea. The body was built for this rest. 12 hours allows the gut lining to repair itself and the morning tea to arrive in a more receptive space. After over 40 years watching what actually works for women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, here are 3 tips I return to again and again. The first, temperature is the most important variable in this entire practice. Too hot and you destroy the living cultures before they ever reach you. 180 degrees every time. 2 minutes of resting after the boil. Never pour straight from a boiling kettle. The second, consistency beats intensity. 5 mornings a week for 3 months will do far more than 3 weeks of daily effort followed by abandonment. My grandmother said it plainly. The herb that grows slowly makes the deepest root. The third, add a pinch of dried ginger to your pu-erh at least twice a week. Ginger amplifies the warming action of the tea in the gut and supports the gut lining in ways that beautifully complement the polyphenols. My grandmother grew ginger on her kitchen windowsill and dried it in bundles every fall. 3 mistakes I see most often with this practice. Mistake 1 is boiling water. It destroys the living microbial cultures that make fermented pu-erh worth drinking. You are left with a bitter cup that will not do what you are hoping. Let the kettle rest 2 full minutes before you pour. Mistake 2 is drinking the tea alongside food. When the gut is already busy digesting, the active compounds get swept into that process before they can do their quieter work on the intestinal wall. Drink the tea first. Wait 30 minutes before eating. Mistake 3 is stopping after 1 week. Visceral fat is not stored overnight, and it does not release overnight. The gut terrain rebuilds on a schedule of weeks and months. Give yourself 8 full weeks before you form any conclusions. My friend, one last thing before you go. What you are protecting here is not just a number on a scale. It is the morning you can kneel in your own garden to pull a weed without asking for help, and the afternoon your youngest grandchild falls asleep against your shoulder and you can hold that weight for a full quiet hour. These are the mornings ahead of you. These are what we are protecting. It is never too late for the body to shift toward health. I have watched women in their late 70s rebuild their gut terrain and reclaim an energy they were certain had left them for good. The body does not stop listening just because we have passed a certain birthday. It listens every single morning, every time we tend it. You are the one tending this body, love. You always have been. Let me pull this together before you go. 1. Visceral fat after 60 is driven largely by gut bacteria depletion and a breakdown of the gut-liver conversation. Reducing calories alone does not address the root of it. 2. Pu-erh tea, the fermented aged tea from Yunnan province, directly seeds the gut terrain and produces compounds that support how the aging body stores and releases belly fat, confirmed by tradition and by research. 3. Preparation determines results. 180 degrees, ripe pu-erh only, steeped 4 minutes on an empty stomach each morning. 4. The vagus nerve breathing practice before the morning cup opens the gut's window of receptivity and is the single element most responsible for meaningful transformation in the women I have watched heal over decades. 5. The 3 supporting practices, the morning walk, the mid-morning vinegar water, and the 12-hour evening quiet, amplify everything the tea does and help the body complete its own clearing work. 6. Consistency over months is the variable that separates real change from modest improvement. 5 mornings a week for 8 weeks minimum before you draw any conclusions. If this reached you today and you are not yet subscribed, please subscribe now. I bring this kind of plant medicine knowledge here every single week, and I do not want you to miss what is coming. Share this with someone who needs it. An older sister, a neighbor who has been frustrated with the same stubborn belly, a dear friend who would rather do things the honest old way than keep reaching for answers that are not working. And leave me a comment. Tell me which part of today surprised you most, or which piece you are starting with first. I read every single comment on this channel, and I will write back when I can. The BoochBod link from earlier is in the description below, whenever you are ready to take a look. Until next time, sister, go tend your garden.